Hello and welcome to Quiz Class. My name's Ellis and I'll be your host for today's general knowledge quiz. This quiz contains 100 questions on a variety of topics, and at the end of the video we'd love you to let us know how many points you scored based on our Quiz Class awards. You could be a champion, master, enthusiast, apprentice or an explorer. Let us know how you rank in the comments at the end of the video. So without further ado, let's get started with question 1. Good luck! Which medieval trade guild was responsible for building cathedrals and other stone structures? Coopers, masons, or chandlers? The correct answer is masons. Question 2. What term describes the behaviour of a solid that, when subjected to stress, undergoes permanent deformation without fracturing? Elasticity, plasticity, or brittleness? So you get 3 multiple choices for each question. You need to pick the correct one. For question 2, it is plasticity. Here's question 3. In traditional Chinese medicine, what diagnostic technique involves examining the pulse at 3 positions on each wrist? Pulse diagnosis, meridian palpitation, or Zhang Fu analysis? The answer is pulse diagnosis. Question 4. Which literary device creates a mild surprise by setting up an expectation and then overturning it? Allegory, bathos, or paraprostokian? The answer is paraprostokian. What is the name for the specialised optical device that produces multiple reflected images in a symmetric pattern? Refractor, kaleidoscope, or stereoscope? The correct answer is kaleidoscope. Question 6. Which physiological response is measured in a polygraph test to detect deception? Pupil dilation, galvanic skin response, or brainwaves? The correct answer is galvanic skin response. What term describes the careful selection of specific books to be removed from a library's collection? Censorship, weeding, or cataloguing? And the answer that we are looking for is weeding. Question 8. In historical linguistics, what is the term for the study of how words change meaning over time? Etymology, semantics, or semantic shift? The term for the study of how words change meaning over time. The answer is semantic shift. 9. Which ancient mathematical concept, first formalised by Euclid, states that the whole is greater than the part? The common notion, the golden ratio, or the Pythagorean theorem? The answer is the common notion. 10. In bookbinding, what term describes the process of sewing signatures, folded sheets, to flexible bands to create a text block? Perfect binding, Coptic binding, or kettle stitch binding? The answer is kettle stitch binding. Which psychological principle states that the perceived intensity of a stimulus increases logarithmically with its actual intensity? Weber's law, Fechner's law, or Stevens' power law? The answer is Fechner's law. 12. What oceanographic term describes a circular current system found in each of the major ocean basins? Upwelling, gyre, or thermocline? The answer is gyre. Question 13. In viticulture, what process involves the removal of certain shoots or buds to concentrate the vine's resources? Trellising, green harvesting, or canopy management? The answer is canopy management. Which ancient civilization's calendar included a 5-day period called Wayeb, considered to be unlucky? Aztec, Maya, or Inca? We hope you're keeping up so far and enjoying the quiz. The answer to question 14 is Maya. Very well done if you got that one right. Here's question 15. In typography, what name is given to the small horizontal line at the base of certain letter forms? Terminal, baseline, or serif? The answer is serif. What term in cognitive science describes the mental process of filling in missing information to create a coherent perception? Confabulation, closure, or priming? The answer is closure. Question 17. Which early 20th century artistic movement sought to capture the dynamism and energy of modern life and technology? Futurism, Dadaism, or Suprematism? Futurism, Dadaism, or Suprematism? The answer is Futurism. In cryptography, what technique involves hiding a secret message within an ordinary message or image? Encryption, steganography, or hashing? The answer we're looking for is steganography. What geological term describes a deep, narrow gorge with steep sides typically formed by erosion? Canyon, arroyo, or ravine? And the answer is a ravine. Question 20. In classical rhetoric, which of Aristotle's modes of persuasion appeals to the audience's emotions? Ethos, pathos, or logos? And the correct answer is pathos. 21. What is the term for a linguistic phenomenon where a word is formed by imitating the sound associated with the object or action? Onomatopoeia, assonance, or kenning? The correct answer is onomatopoeia. Question 22. In neurobiology, what is the name for the electrical insulation that forms around nerve fibres? Dendrite, myelin sheath, or axon terminal? The correct answer is myelin sheath. 23. Which philosophical concept developed by Arthur Schopenhauer suggests that reality is driven by a blind unconscious force? Will to power, will to meaning, or will to life? The correct answer is will to life. 24. In crystallography, what term describes the smallest group of atoms that has the overall symmetry of a crystal and from which the entire lattice can be built by repetition? Lattice point, unit cell, or crystal system? The answer is unit cell as we approach the quarter-way mark. What culinary technique involves cooking food sealed in a vacuum bag at a precisely controlled temperature for an extended time? Pressure cooking, confit, or sous vide? The correct answer is sous vide. Question 26. Which mathematical concept describes a distribution where data tends to cluster around a central value with no bias to the left or right? Normal distribution, skewed distribution, or bimodal distribution? The answer is normal distribution. 27. In art conservation, what term describes the reversible process of filling and repainting damaged areas of a painting? Restoration, inpainting, or retouching? The answer is inpainting. What is the name for the specialised technique in glass making where coloured glass is overlaid with clear glass and then partially cut away to create a design? Cameo glass, millefiore, or dichroic glass? The answer is cameo glass. 29. In linguistics, what grammatical term describes words that introduce dependent clauses? Determiners, subordinating conjunctions, or modal auxiliaries? The correct answer is subordinating conjunctions. 30. Which ancient navigational instrument uses the positions of stars to determine latitude? Astrolabe, sextant, or camal? The answer is a camal. In formal logic, which rule allows the deduction of P from the premises if P then Q and Q? Modus ponens, modus tollens, or affirming the consequent? A very, very big well done if you got this one right. It's affirming the consequent. 32. What botanical term describes a plant that completes its life cycle in 2 years, typically flowering in the second year? Annual, biennial, or perennial? The answer is biennial. Question 33. In architecture, what is the name for the triangular space above a door or window, often decorated with sculpture or other ornament? Tympanum, spandrel, or soffit? The correct answer is tympanum. 34. Which economic principle suggests that market intervention to correct one problem may create other unintended problems? Opportunity cost, theory of the second best, or comparative advantage? The answer is theory of the second best. In materials science, what property describes a material's ability to return to its original shape after deformation? Ductility, malleability, or elasticity? The answer is elasticity. What anthropological term describes a kinship system where descent is traced exclusively through maternal lines? Patrilineal, matrilineal, or bilateral? The answer is matrilineal. Which psychological concept refers to the tendency for individuals to attribute their own actions to external factors and others' actions to internal factors? Actor-observer bias, self-serving bias, or just world hypothesis? The answer is actor-observer bias. Question 38. In cartography, what type of map projection preserves areas but distorts shapes? Conformal projection, equidistant projection, or equal area projection? The answer is equal area projection. 39. What literary technique involves breaking a word at the end of a line and continuing it on the next line? Caesura, enjambment, or asyndeton? The correct answer is enjambment. In mycology, what term describes the network of fungal threads that make up the main body of a fungus? Mycelium, hyphae, or sporangium? The correct answer to question 40 is mycelium. Question 41. Which geological process involves the formation of a mountain range due to the compression of Earth's crust? Rifting, orogenesis, or isostasy? Rifting, orogenesis, or isostasy? The answer is orogenesis. 42. In epistemology, what term describes knowledge based on experience rather than reasoning? A priori knowledge, a posteriori knowledge, or tacit knowledge? The answer is a posteriori knowledge. 43. What is the architectural term for a structural element that transfers the weight of a masonry arch or vault to a supporting column? Impost, voiture, or springer? Impost, voussoir, or springer? The answer is springer. Question 44. In statistics, which sampling method involves dividing the population into subgroups and then randomly selecting from each? Cluster sampling, stratified sampling, or systematic sampling? The correct answer is stratified sampling. 45. What term in cognitive psychology refers to mental shortcuts that help us to make decisions quickly but sometimes lead to errors? Cognitive biases, heuristics, or paradigms? The answer is heuristics. 46. Which printing technique uses a stencil attached to a fine mesh screen to transfer ink onto a substrate? Lithography, screen printing, or intaglio? The answer is screen printing. In music theory, what is a term for a dissonant chord that creates tension and requires resolution? Dominant seventh chord, major triad, or perfect cadence? The correct answer is dominant seventh chord. 48. What scientific principle states that the intensity of light decreases inversely with the square of the distance from the source? Beer-Lambert law, inverse square law, or Stefan-Boltzmann law? The answer is inverse square law. In textile arts, what term describes the technique of interlocking loops of yarn with a hooked needle? Knitting, crochet, or macrame? Interlocking loops of yarn with a hooked needle is crochet. 50. Which rhetorical device deliberately uses words that imitate or suggest the sound they describe? Consonants, onomatopoeia, or alliteration? The correct answer is onomatopoeia, and we are now halfway through this quiz. 51. In photography, what technical term describes the range of tones in an image from darkest to lightest? Contrast, dynamic range, or saturation? The answer is dynamic range. 52. Which concept in evolutionary biology refers to adaptations that evolve for one purpose but later serve another? Convergent evolution, exaptation, or homology? The correct answer is exaptation. 53. What is the name for the specialised clay used in traditional Japanese tea ceremony utensils? Raku, kaolin, or terracotta? The correct answer is raku. 54. In acoustics, what phenomenon occurs when a vibrating object causes another object with the same natural frequency to vibrate? Diffraction, sympathetic resonance, or interference? The answer is sympathetic resonance. Which philosophical concept associated with Thomas Kuhn describes a fundamental change in the basic concepts within a scientific field? Paradigm shift, falsifiability, or reductionism? Some quite wordy questions here today. We hope you're keeping up with the quiz. The answer to 55 is paradigm shift, and now we're moving on to question 56. In hydrology, what term describes underground layers of water-bearing permeable rock or sediment? Watershed, aquifer, or estuary? The answer is aquifer. What linguistic process involves changing a word's part of speech without changing its form? Derivation, conversion, or compounding? The answer is conversion. Question 58. In ballet, what term describes a turn on one foot with the other leg in a specified position? Arabesque, pirouette, or jeté? The correct answer is a pirouette. 59. Which astronomical term describes the point in a celestial body's orbit when it is furthest from the Sun? Aphelion, perihelion, or apogee? The correct answer is aphelion. 60. In formal debate, what term describes the logical fallacy of attacking the person rather than their argument? Straw man, ad hominem, or red herring? The answer is ad hominem. What metallurgical process involves heating an alloy to a specific temperature and then cooling it quickly to increase hardness? Annealing, tempering, or quenching? The answer is quenching. 62. Which philosophical concept developed by Hans-Georg Gadamer emphasises the role of history and cultural context in interpretation? Hermeneutics, phenomenology, or deconstruction? The answer is hermeneutics. In cartography, what type of map uses symbols whose areas are proportional to the values they represent? Choropleth map, cartogram, or isoline map? The answer is a cartogram. What botanical term describes the phenomenon where certain plant species flower only once in their lifetime and then die? Vernalization, semilparus, or photoperiodism? The answer is semilparus. 65. In library science, what term describes the process of assigning descriptive terms to classify and describe information resources? Cataloguing, indexing, or accessioning? The correct answer is indexing. 66. Which statistical concept describes the difference between the sample estimate and the true population parameter? Variance, standard error, or bias? The answer is bias. 67. In art history, what term describes a decorative technique where small pieces of coloured materials are set in mortar to create a pattern? Fresco, mosaic, or marquetry? The answer is mosaic. What physical phenomenon explains why a spinning top remains upright? Conservation of angular momentum, gyroscopic precession, or centripetal force? The answer is gyroscopic precession. In literary theory, which approach analyses texts for their implicit ideological assumptions and social power relations? New criticism, critical theory, or structuralism? The answer is critical theory. What geological term describes a bowl-shaped depression formed by the collapse of land following volcanic activity? Caldera, crater, sinkhole? The answer is caldera. In economics, what concept describes goods for which demand increases as price increases, contrary to the typical demand curve? Substitute goods, complementary goods, or Veblen goods? The answer is Veblen goods. Which cognitive bias leads people to search for information that confirms their existing beliefs? Availability heuristic, confirmation bias, or hindsight bias? The correct answer is confirmation bias. 73. In linguistics, what term describes a word formed by shortening and combining parts of existing words? Acronym, portmanteau, or backformation? The answer is portmanteau. What architectural feature consists of a series of arches supported by columns? Colonnade, arcade, or peristyle? The answer is arcade. In colour theory, what term describes colours that are opposite each other on the colour wheel? Analogous colours, complementary colours, or monochromatic colours? The answer is complementary colours. We've got just 25 questions left. Which mathematical concept describes a surface that can be formed by rolling up a flat piece of paper without stretching or tearing? Developable surface, minimal surface, or Riemann surface? The answer is developable surface. In marine biology, what term describes the synchronized release of gametes by coral colonies? Bleaching, mass spawning, or polyp extension? The correct answer is mass spawning. What culinary technique involves cooking ingredients sealed in a pouch with their own juices? En papillote, bracing, or poaching? The answer is en papillote. In philosophy of mind, what theory holds that mental states are identical to brain states? Dualism, identity theory, or functionalism? The answer is identity theory. Question 80 next. Which historical term describes the practice of forcing nobles to live at the royal court to prevent them from building independent power bases? Clientelism, domestication of the nobility, or patronage? The answer is domestication of the nobility. 81. In biochemistry, what process involves the breakdown of complex molecules into simpler ones with the release of energy? Anabolism, catabolism, or isomerism? The answer is catabolism. 82. What architectural principle states that a building's form should be determined by its function, materials, and structure? Form follows function, golden section, or classical orders? The answer is form follows function. In physics, what term describes the property of a system that remains unchanged under a transformation? Equilibrium, invariance, or entropy? The answer is invariance. Which psychological phenomenon describes the tendency to rely too heavily on the first piece of information offered when making decisions? Anchoring effect, framing effect, or mere exposure effect? The answer is anchoring effect. 85. In linguistics, what process involves changing a word's pronunciation to make it more similar to nearby sounds? metathesis, assimilation, or epenthesis? The answer is assimilation. 86. What term in art history describes the technique of representing three-dimensional objects on a two-dimensional surface? Isometric projection, perspective, or orthographic projection? In art history, there's a term. It describes the technique of representing three-dimensional objects on a two-dimensional surface. That term is perspective. In formal logic, which rule allows one to infer not P from the premises if P then Q and not Q? Modus ponens, modus tollens, or hypothetical syllogism? Some tough questions today. The answer to that one is modus tollens. Give yourself some credit no matter what your score. Here's question 88. What geological feature forms when a stream cuts through a meander neck, creating a freestanding loop? Oxbow Lake, alluvial fan, or braided stream? The answer we're looking for is Oxbow Lake. Question 89. In music theory, what term describes a composition technique where a melody is played simultaneously at different speeds? Counterpoint, augmentation, or mensuration canon? The answer is mensuration canon. 90. Which anthropological term describes the process by which individuals acquire the social and cultural aspects of their society? Acculturation, enculturation, or assimilation? The answer is enculturation. What meteorological term describes a narrow corridor of strong winds found in the upper atmosphere? Trade winds, jet stream, or Hadley cell? The answer is jet stream. What architectural term describes a large window divided by mullions and transoms, typically found in Gothic churches? Clerestory, lancet window, or tracery window? The answer is tracery window. 93. In literary theory, which narrative technique deliberately provides misleading information to create false expectations? Red herring, unreliable narrator, or foreshadowing? The answer is red herring. What archaeological technique uses small samples of material to determine an object's chemical composition? X-ray fluorescence, neutron activation analysis, or thermoluminescence? The answer is neutron activation analysis. In statistics, what term describes the measure of how much individual data points differ from the mean? Range, variance, or median? The answer is variance. 5 questions left. Here's question 96. Which philosophical concept developed by Hannah Arendt describes the thoughtless acceptance of orders without critical evaluation? Banality of evil, categorical imperative, or ethical egoism? The answer is banality of evil. 97. In typography, what term describes the adjustment of space between specific pairs of letters to improve appearance? Tracking, leading, or kerning? The answer is kerning. What meteorological phenomenon occurs when a mass of warm air moves over a mass of cold air, creating elevated precipitation? Frontal precipitation, orographic precipitation, or warm frontal precipitation? The answer is warm frontal precipitation. In cognitive linguistics, what term describes words that categorize experience into meaningful units? Phonemes, morphemes, or lexemes? The answer is lexemes. Question 100. Which astronomical term refers to the apparent retrograde motion of planets as viewed from Earth? Precession, nutation, or apparent retrograde motion? The correct answer is apparent retrograde motion. And we always finish with a bonus question. In historical printing, what term describes metal types cast as a single piece for an entire line of text? Let us know the answer to that one in the comments, and whilst you're there, you can let us know how many points you scored and which quiz class Einstein reward you're taking home. Is it Champion, Master, Enthusiast, Apprentice, or an Explorer award? We'd love to know whatever you scored. And that really does bring us to the end of our quiz. Thanks for playing, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon to be notified on all of our upcoming videos. In the meantime though, we have plenty of quizzes already uploaded that you can try right now, so why not hit another one and dive straight in. My name's Ellis and I've been your host. Thanks again for joining us today at Quiz Class. We'll see you next time.